使唔使等？唔使等係 OK。好，咁啲團體都入咗嚟啦，咁我哋局長。
All right, we have all the deputations in here. The secretary is also here. Let's pick up where we left off. We have 27 deputations and 5 individuals for this session. Just a reminder that channel 0 for the floor, number 1 for Cantonese, and number 2 for English. And also a reminder that your speech will not be protected under Cap 382, Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance, and nor will your submissions be so protected. Each deputation will be given 3 minutes, and thereafter we'll hear a response from the Secretary, and then throw the floor open for questions by members. All right, then let's proceed according to the order. Mr. Tam, NT Evangelical Ambassador. Chairman, the COP has convened a couple of meetings and put in place the policies. The members of the public are casting doubt on whether the COP is alleviating poverty. Some even criticized Kin-kee Fong, and it makes it sound as if Kin-kee Fong is taking us up the garden path. Now we are supportive of the policies. The rental housing and the long-term housing strategy has accommodated so many who are living in resettlement areas, in hillside squatter areas, and so on. The grassroots people are accommodated and were given a decent life. Now, to tie in with the industrial development, we have trained up so many industrialists. We have the student finance scheme so that the poor people can get education and change their fate. Poverty has to do with education and housing. The honourable members and government officials must realize that housing will be very important to alleviating poverty. The policies have been around for so long, I don't think these benefits should be calculated in the poverty line. If we adopt this concept, we have 1.2 million people who are living under the poverty line, and this will be reduced to 900,000, and a lot of people will disappear from the poverty line. The government should not take into account the market rental minus the rental housing rent, and the private market property prices are going up. And if everything being equal, the population of the poor will decline, and the rating and valuation the department should evaluate the values of the property. The COP should not work behind closed doors. It should be transparent. It should engage the public for consultation. According to Census and Statistics Department, those above 65 will go up from 13% in 2016 to 28% in 2039, by which time 1 in 4 will be elderly people. The elderly population is getting larger with all the corresponding problems for our society. So we should have the roadmap and the timetable for universal retirement protection. We have to set history. We have to make history for Hong Kong. Right? Pastoral Center for Workers, Catholic Diocese Hong Kong Diocese. Well, this is the very first time I get to see you, Mr. Secretary. On my way here, I saw so many dockers staging protests outside Hong Kong Center. Now, what is the role of the SLW? The strike has been going on for 30 days. The dockers are seeking pay rise. Why are they seeking pay rise? That's because of the rising costs of living. their pay has been frozen for so many years. Now let's come back to the poverty line, which has been talked about for so long. Now, what is the LWB doing? They cannot resolve the labor dispute. The poverty issue has been dragging on for so long. About 100 years ago, our diocese wrote something. Let me cite this. Those who are richer can have so many means to protect themselves. They don't need any assistance from the government. They don't need any assistance from the government, although the government has done so much to help them. Those who have hard life don't really have anything to rely on. So they have to rely on the state for assistance. For this reason, those who are living on daily wages should be protected and given concerns by the government. And what am I driving at? You don't really have to do anything for the rich. It's the poor that would need assistance. If the poverty line is pitched at half of the median household income, which is a very, very low level, how many people do you expect to help? According to the paper, one of the functions of setting the poverty line is to help to facilitate policy formulation. Now, facilitating is not really mandating. The government departments can choose to ignore this poverty line. Now, Mr. Zheng is creating this poverty line with so much fanfare, and the departments don't have to follow. The CS also said before that the poverty line is not really a rigid line for policies to be formulated. Now, the poverty line is there to help those who are needy. I don't think the rich people should be given any assistance whatsoever. Right, next, North District Employment Concern Group, Madam Kwok. Secretary Zheng, I've been meeting you for so many years. The transport subsidy has been dragging on for a couple of years, and it is still pitched at $600. Now, we are having a hard time, and the transportation costs are going up and up. Why don't you show more concerns for the grassroots workers? We are making contribution to Hong Kong. We did have make contribution to Hong Kong. Why don't you treat these workers in a better way? Mr. Yu talked about the policies. If the policies are not linked with the poverty line, then the grassroots workers will not be given their assistance. If this is only indicative, I've been instructing my son to behave better, but he's not listening to me. Now, what is the point of giving all these indications and giving instructions? We keep talking and talking without getting anywhere. Now, we are going to donate $100 million to Sichuan province. We are supportive, but if I may put this to you, Mr. Secretary, that you're only earmarking $100 million to the food bank per annum. How do you think we can survive? We very much hope that you would be more forthcoming and do something to help the grassroots workers, instead of just giving us these crumbs that we don't need. We deserve better. Well, Mr. Chow, well, I'm sure that the government officials are all educated. They know how to write the word poverty. Now, the Chinese character poverty has to do with money, and we have to share the money with the poor people. And this is what we derive from the Chinese character poverty. Poverty has been around in Hong Kong for so long. The major cause is that most of the Hong Kong people are living under the poverty line, and they are living in dire straits. Many people are collecting cardboard boxes, or they are scavenging around the rubbish bins or around town. There is such a big proportion of people who are doing that. Now, previously we didn't see so many scavengers, but now the food prices are so high, and there are more and more people joining the rank of the scavengers. The Hong Kong government keeps saying that Hong Kong has a lot of resources, but where are the resources coming from? Where are we devoting the resources to? Shouldn't we devote more resources to those who are at the grassroots level? Shouldn't there be more assistance for the working class people? Because they are getting paid really in a pathetic manner, and they simply cannot cope with the escalating prices. So the workers have no choice but toil very, very hard, and they spend all their time, they spend their whole life working away, and they simply cannot look after the family. And many senior citizens are picking up cardboard boxes because their family members cannot afford to look after them, and they have no option but resort to begging and picking up cardboard boxes. Some of them cannot afford the rental, and they're living rough on the street as tramps. And I don't think we need to see this happen in the community. We are sitting on bountiful reserves. Why doesn't the government devote some reserves to help those who are in need? And also the needy workers, they really can't make ends meet. I very much hope that the government can do something practical and help these needy people. Thank you.
Mr. Leung from the Civic Party. Thank you. Hong Kong is such an affluent society. Why is it that the poverty situation is so serious? If we have a Gini ratio of 0.537, which shows that the wealth gap is really very large. With Hong Kong is such an affluent society, we still have this poverty problem, and this is really sad. Look at the figures. In 2010, the Gini ratio is 0.525, in 2011, 0.537, which shows that the poverty gap is getting wider. If you look at the figures, according to the comprehensive household survey, low-income families earning less than $4,000 per month was 8% in 2001, it went up to 9.6% in 2011. So the figures show that the number of such poor families have increased to more than 200,000. If you look at some of the surveys undertaken by organizations like Oxfam, they've conducted similar studies in 2011, and they found that over the last 10 years, the number of poor families made up about 1.1 million. So 1 in 6 would be poor. So there are more than 100,000 households which fall under the category of the working poor, and that shows that the policies of the Hong Kong administration in tackling poverty has been a total failure, and they've not really, focused on the main major focal issues in tackling poverty. They've only come up with, ineffective measures. So if you look at other jurisdictions like Taiwan, they look set the poverty line at 6% of the disposable income level. In the U.S., 3 times of the expenses on basic necessities. The administration now is inclined to consider the EU standard or the OECD standard or method. That is setting the poverty line at 60% or 50% of the median monthly household income. Eventually you have to set the line, but the point is that you must do it quickly. And once you've set the poverty line, you need to have ways to deal with the problem of poverty. In the past, the government set 24 poverty parameters to gauge the poverty situation. Actually, all these parameters may need to be adjusted already. Take unemployment. We have a very good employment figure, only 3.4%. We don't have an unemployment problem. Why is it that we have so many poor people? It shows exactly that there is, a problem with these indicators. There's a need to review these objective standards. So, thank you. I think we've been talking about the poverty line for so many years, and at last the government has decided to do something that is at least good news, although it's come too late. Since 1997, there was a white paper on social welfare, and it is 22 years ago. And during the interim, we cannot rely on the government's so-called 5-year plan, and whenever a secretary came into office, he would, have his own plans for welfare. So our policies is such that every time the welfare panel and its working groups hold their meetings, and when they conduct public hearings, every time we are talking about the same issue, we mention the lack of proper planning, including the policy on policy alleviation. The government proposes to set the poverty line at 50% of the median monthly household income. For the DP, it's okay if you set the line at that level. But I'm sure many deputations will tell you that the poverty line set at 50% of the domestic income level is not sufficient, and a single poverty line would not suffice. Since all the information is available, whether you set the poverty line at 40, 30, 60, 70% of the median monthly household income, when you disclose the figures in future, please disclose all such information so that with these information in line, of course, you have your official statistics, but other academics and organizations like NGOs, when they conduct their studies, it will be helpful if they have these figures to help them. Next, you take the market value of the public housing rental in helping set the poverty line. Is really controversial. Honestly, the rents paid by the PRH tenants, for many of those in the rank and file population, obviously it's a form of welfare, but the market rental level is ridiculous. How can you use this ridiculous standard and use it as one of the objective criteria? So when rents are already has reached a reasonable level, and you incorporate them in your calculation of poverty line, the figures will be very distorted. Originally, we have the CSS line system in place. Unfortunately, since 1996, after you've conducted the basic survey on subsistence, 17 years have lapsed, and you have not conducted another review. 17 years ago, we don't have Android telephones, smart iPhones, and so on, and many expenses would not have been there 17 years ago. And now you're still sticking the same indicators or parameters. I think you should really, consider, updating your policies. New People's Party. We welcome government's decision to set a poverty line to help the poor, but the poverty line would reflect the may not really be pegged to the government's welfare policies. The government uses the relative poverty concept, and we're concerned about that. Normally, the government can redistribute resources through taxation in order to narrow the wealth gap. In Europe and the OECD countries, normally they use the relative poverty as the basis to narrow the wealth gap. Using the relative poverty concept to set the poverty line are controversial in several ways. First of all, there are big controversies as to where we should peg the poverty line, whether it's 50, 60, or 7% of the median monthly household income. There is no objective criteria or scientific basis, and it can be easily influenced by political considerations. Also, for the retirees who don't have any income, the assets, support from family members, how would those be calculated? If you use the relative poverty concept, you may exaggerate the size of the poor population, especially those who have assets and savings but no income at all. The population, bear in mind that the aging population problem is getting more and more serious. The relative poverty concept cannot really help you evaluate the effectiveness of your policies, unless the wages of low-income groups increase faster. Otherwise, there will be more and more poor families. And also, when the economy goes into recession, the overall domestic income will fall. And determining the size of the poor families based on the median monthly income of the household may underestimate the size of the poor population. In the long term, when you formulate your policies, you must link personal income to the overall income of the whole society. Only then can you reduce the number of poor families. On the other hand, it may result in some low-income families giving up work in order to rely on social welfare. To adopt the European standard is not a reasonable arrangement. The government has to tell the public why it doesn't want to set the U.S. Practice of setting an absolute poverty line or income substitution method to ensure that the basic needs of those in need are met. In setting the poverty line, is it our objective to promote a fairer distribution of wealth, or to ensure that those with the greatest need will be taken care of? Before we have a consensus, shouldn't the government, first come to some conclusions on those issues? Next, Ms. Chen. I'm Chen. I represent the Ting Shui Wai Alliance to fight for the rights of low-income families. I think the poverty line should be set at 60% of the monthly median monthly income of domestic households. From the Kai Fongs, I've learned that income cannot really cope with the raging inflation. Furthermore, the children, they have to pay for the children's tuition fees, extracurricular activities, and meals. Sometimes the women, even when they're sick, they dare not, see a doctor, and 20-30% of the family simply cannot make ends meet, and they have to rely on bank overdrafts of $2,000 to $3,000 per month to help them tide over the difficult times. So setting the poverty line at 50% of the median monthly income, the household income, will not be able to help us, cope with inflation. So I think the poverty line should be set at 60%. Only then will they be able to reflect the reasonable level of expenditure for low-income families. Setting it at 60% can generally reflect the gravity of the poverty problem in Hong Kong. Secondly, the purpose of setting the poverty line, I think you should set the poverty line in order to help the poor. To help the poor means that when you help the government formulate policies, you should try to help these poor people so that they will be able to live in dignity. But the poverty line you propose, every time what we've heard is that the poverty line will only help you evaluate the effectiveness of your poverty alleviation measures. You talk about measurement, you don't provide for any support. So I don't know what's the point of setting up this poverty line. Thank you. Madam Pang Kit Ling. Thank you. I'd like to share with members my comment about the relationship between CSSA and poverty. From the Oxfam website, I've found the median figures for CSSA recipients for 2009. Single family, 3,408 something. 2 person, $6,300. 3 person, $8,000. 4 persons, $9,900. Those 6 family members, $14,000. That's the average figure. And these are the figures for 2009. But someone already said that the CSSA payment had not been reviewed for a long time. If we look at 2012, when we say that the median household income, we talk about 50% of that median monthly income, compared with 2012 is a big deviation. One single person, 3,500. 2 person, 4 person, 14,000. 5 person, $15,000. In other words, CSSA recipients, the income of CSSA recipients, except for 1 person and 6 person households, 1 person household more than 50%, 6 person household close to 50%, 2 to 5 person families only about 40%. So when the poverty line is set at 50% of the median monthly household income, is much below 50%. It's only 40%. So the CSSA system is now creating poor families. Also, earlier, it was suggested that if we also include the PRH rentals as income, then I would like to ask another question. That is, can you convert the market value of the PRH rentals and turn it into cash? Because the housing department has already made the deductions before it's paid back to them. So can you add the market rental value to the CSSA payment? When people, if we're talking about setting poverty line, have we been poor before? I've actually lived in subdivided room flat myself. I've also had struggled hard for some time. But after a few years, I no longer needed to live in the subdivided flats, and I seem to have forgotten about that experience. But recently, when I went to Singapore, and asked the people living in those subdivided flats, and the stench there remind me that this was the stench that I had put up with when I was young. And I realized that I didn't understand many of the needs of the poor people. For people who set the poverty line, how much do you understand? Why don't you help people who are genuinely poor to participate in the setting of the poverty line? Next, we have Ms. Young. Concerning CSSA and Low-Income Alliance. It's the second time that I'm attending the hearing here. The first time I came, the Secretary was also present. Since the last hearing, the COP has arrived at a consensus and say the poverty line will be set at 50%, and they will also propose to include the rents paid by PRH tenants. I don't know whether the Secretary heard the views of the Deputations and the Kaifongs last time. So today I'd like to repeat once again my views regarding the poverty line. First of all, in January to this year, several community organizations conducted a survey on the poverty line, and they asked the Kaifongs whether the poverty line should be set at 50 or 60% of the monthly median income of households. More than 70% believe that it should be set at 60%, and that it would be more reasonable. Basically, 80% of the incomes are spent on basic necessities like food, transportation, rents, and so on. They're only left with 20% of the income on education, medical care, or contingency. So setting the poverty line at 50% of the median monthly household income simply would not help the poor families to pay for the basic needs. So the poverty line will need to be set at 60%. We also recommend that 7% of the median monthly household income should be regarded as the poverty prevention line, because people may fall into the poverty trap because of the ups and downs of the economy. I also have another question for the Secretary, and I will explain later. According to international standards, the poverty line will be set at 50 to 60% of the median monthly household income. But in Hong Kong, without any thorough discussion, the COP seems to already have arrived at a consensus that it will be set at 50% and not 60%. I'd like the Secretary to explain that. I also agree with another deputation, that is, what is the purpose of setting a poverty line in Hong Kong? We strongly object to the government using the poverty line as the basis for statistical analysis. That is, after dishing out these welfare payments, to what extent will the poor population fall? We would want the government to use the poverty line and through subsidies and other measures help those who are below the poverty lines lift them above the poverty line through such measures. Next, Ms. Mantrapic's Fund. Actually, I represent a concerned group living in Prince Edward. Many parents are concerned about equal opportunities for development for the children. We've heard about the poverty line for a long time. The purpose of setting the poverty line is to help identify the poor population of Hong Kong. After you've identified that population, the government is not doing anything. Even CY Leung, during his election campaign, said that he undertook to look into the question of subsidy for low-income families, so the families living below the poverty line will be able to improve, we'll see some improvement in the livelihood. Does the poor population only comprise of parents and adults? Even children can be below the poverty line. Therefore, it is our position that when the subsidies to low-income families should also include expenses for children who have to pay for their to help them with the learning. And the poverty line should not be set at such a low level, but rather through different ways you should help improve the parents among the rank and file to help the family move out of poverty. We have a knowledge-based economy, and education is a crucial factor in helping people, get rid of poverty. The poor families are very concerned as to whether or not the children can have the chance of upward social mobility through education. In our society, I think we are now promoting whole person development. Other than excelling in the academic subjects, students will need to also develop skills in arts and sports. Many surveys have been conducted, and we know that children now need to take up 4 to 6 extracurricular activities. But the fees for these activities are very expensive. When the government provide for transport and textbook subsidies, many rank-and-file parents will not be able to send the children to attend these extracurricular activities. But whether it's children going to primary, secondary schools, or even universities, and they need to spend a lot on extracurricular activities. Since if children can participate in these if they can't participate in these extracurricular activities, the room for development will be curtailed. For low-income families, other than subsidizing them for the daily necessities, I think you should also provide subsidy for the children to attend these extracurricular activities. And also, we believe that there is a shortage of family-friendly facilities, and many of the hours do not match the parents' working hours, and as a result, the parents have to give up work in order to stay home to look after the children. So I think there is a need to improve on the childcare services.
Mr. Lee from the 60% group. As you all know, Mr. Donald Tsang did not do a good job on poverty alleviation, and the number of impoverished people was actually going up. And now Mr. CY Leung is new in the job, and in the past some of his associates is still here, such as Ms. Carrie Lam. And now Mr. Leung's associates are still tackling the problem today. But these people are not thinking about how to overcome this problem now. And they're thinking of tricks to go around the problem. And they are trying to evade problems, tough problems. And at the end, they are just trying to make the figures meet each other. CY is not thinking about how to tackle the problem of poverty, or thinking about the situation of these impoverished people. And what he is doing now is keep lowering his standards. I think we should not call this a poverty line. This is just it's turned into something else. We should have indicators to alleviate poverty, but the government is just dodging the problem, and they just keep lowering their own standards, and they just do very little, and they are saying that they have done a lot. I want to point out a few problems with setting the poverty line. If we consider income, so suppose everyone in Hong Kong earns a few thousand more or less every month, the number of impoverished people would still be the same. So this is very problematic. And secondly, if we consider Hong Kong's inflation rate, it's out of sync with salary levels. If we calculate income, this is very problematic for the poor people. If we look at Hong Kong's economy, it's an M-type economy, and we can never meet the middle class. So this is one problem with the calculation. If you are using 50% of the monthly median household income as the standard, so families with 5 or 6 people can still not make the standard. If you are making such a simple calculation, you should be more lenient to the people. From the Kwai Chung Estate Grassroots Concern Group, thank you. The government is saying that the poverty line is not the same as the assistance line. So you are not linking the poverty line with the support line. So you're saying that the poverty line is only used to evaluate the effectiveness of the poverty policies. So my question is, if you are setting this 50% mark, this is 50% income mark, this is inadequate. Let's look at a four-person family. The amount for CSSA is 22,000, 18,000. If we look at the total household monthly family income, it's only 14,000. If we set the poverty line at 50%, it does not cover these people I mentioned above. So they are excluding these people from the assistance scheme, and it cannot help evaluate the effectiveness of your programs. And the increase in income does not represent an increase in living quality. So some people might be above the poverty line, but they have spent half their income on their subdivided flats, and coupled with transportation and books, they are left with just over $1,000 for as living expenses. So these show that the 50% mark is not a good standard to set, and our demand is is that this 50% mark is inadequate, and we should raise the bar to 60%. And rather than to play around with this idea of poverty line, we should help more, provide more assistance for children and the working poor. Thank you. Mr. Ng from I Want Low Income Allowance Alliance. Thank you, Chairman. Today we are talking about poverty line. We have heard from the public or the news that the government's idea is to set the poverty line at 50% of the monthly median household income. And some groups are actually opposing this idea. And we can see that after discussions with different groups, whether 50 or 60% is the best standard. So why do we insist on 60%? We have a number of considerations. We see that the government and a lot of groups are setting the bar at 50%, so it seems reasonable. But why do we insist on 60%? In Hong Kong, we have a very unique environment. We do not just merely follow what others are doing. We have to consider Hong Kong's uniqueness. And you cannot say Hong Kong is a poor country. Hong Kong's income level is not very low when compared with other countries, but the expenditure and inflation is very, very big, very high. Considering the circumstances, if we still set the bar at 50%, a lot of real poor people will not be protected, will not be covered, and this will exclude a lot of people who are in need. And why do we say 60%? We have looked at a number of other countries with similar backgrounds as Hong Kong, such as UK. They are setting the bar at 60%. And we see that the 60% mark would include a lot of grassroots families with a family of 4, a working father. 60% would help, would be able to help these people. And this is how the poverty line can really have its effects. The government has been saying that the poverty line is just for reference rather than a rigid standard for various policies. So my question is, so what's the point of having this policy, poverty line? So why do we waste so much time and effort to do this if this cannot help the public? And one thing I find very strange is in the calculation of public housing allowance, rents, and if you can find rent a flat with 5,000 in the same district, you would count the public rents as 3,500. This is very strange. From the Hong Kong CSS. The government is taking the monthly median household income, a particular percentage, as reference in establishing the poverty line. I think using this method as a way to evaluate the government's policy, it's a valid solution, and it's very common on the global scene. No matter which percentage we set the bar, we cannot determine which people need help and how much need they help, and no matter how high the percentage we set, it is still a very arbitrary method. And when I listen to the response of the COP, I think the government is setting the poverty line just for monitoring and evaluation. instead of determining which people need help and how much need they help. As a matter of fact, a lot of groups have expectations on the COP, and they hope the governments can show their commitment for a poverty alleviation and how much help they are willing to offer. I hope rather than the using the monthly median household income as the only standard, I think it's a good way to evaluate the government's efforts, but it's not enough to respond to public expectations. We might need another answer to determine which people to help and how much we need to help. There are voices from elsewhere saying that there's a concept called a basic living allowance. How much money does a person need to satisfy his or her basic living needs? I think when the government designs its schemes for the grassroots, they should derive policies and show their commitments to the poor. From the Tin Shui Wai Low Income Subsidy Concern Group. The government has been saying that the poverty line does not include the assistance line. And the government has a few objectives which are to evaluate and its schemes. So what is your criteria for providing aid to the poor? If the poverty line is just a gauge, what's its purpose? If we want to look at how well a student is doing, a school might assign grades A to D. Maybe 60 marks is the passing point. For students who do not meet the mark, the school, the teachers would help them. They would help the students achieve the passing mark rather than for evaluation purposes. So the government cannot just treat the poverty line as a tool for evaluation, but it should be used to gauge which people need help, which poor people to support. The second point is for the poverty line, the household median income should not include rents for public housing. Public housing is a benefit for the needy, and the government is in charge. The public does not have much to say. They can only choose whether to accept the public housing or not. We think that public housing, as opposed to private estates, the choices are very limited, and we do not know how much allowance there is for public housing. For private housing, the nature is very different from public housing. Private housing is intended to make profits, while public housing is a form of welfare. But is it if it's welfare, why do we have to include the cost in the household income calculations? Now the formula is based on the affordability of public of the flat in terms of a particular percentage, and market prices are floating, market rents are floating. If the housing market has reached its summits, so does it mean people living in housing estates, they are out of the poverty zone, and the government does not have to do anything? Do you think this is reasonable? Finally, I hope the government can, in a more comprehensive way look at the problem of poverty. For families, can I make my last point? The point is up. Time is up. Finally, nobody likes a dominant parents. So I think the government should look at the problem from the parents' side of view. Mr. Gong from Tin Shui Wai Community Development Alliance. I got up very early this morning and came here from Tin Shui Wai. I hope everyone can look at this. These tree skin. I hope I want to introduce this to the secretary. This can be used to for soup. You can prepare the soup with the pig intestines. I think the government does not have a backbone. If you look at the policy address again, the poverty line is intended to help the needy people. If you have read the news, Mr. Chung, you have said that the poverty line has nothing to do with the assistance scheme. I'm very surprised that you told the media that the welfare policies is not linked with the poverty line. So how can you explain yourself to the people here, the people of Tin Shui Wai? What's the real purpose of the poverty line? Is that just for evaluation? Mr. Chang, please do not just look at your computer all day in your office. Please come to Tin Shui Wai and talk to our people, talk to people in the community. You are telling us that the poverty line is used for gauging, for evaluation only. So what's the point? You have to explain yourself to the Hong Kong public, the people of Tin Shui Wai. I think you own us for at least 10 years already, and you are saying that this is a poverty line, is not a welfare line. Where's the commitment of the Hong Kong government? Finally, you're saying that the poverty line is set as 50% if you are including public housing rents. This is just laughable, and this will become a topic in the general education scheme for the children. Is this what you want our next generation to say? You have got so much criticisms for so many years, and it's still the same. Can you link poverty line? Can you promise to link the poverty line with welfare policies and use the poverty line to define which people are poor? Can you commit to reduce the number of poor people?
Madam Ho, Chairman, I'm here on behalf of the severe disabled people who are at work and how they cope with their poverty. I'm sure you understand people tend to be sick and while they are mired in poverty. Now, when someone is sick, he needs family care, and that would incur quite a lot of expenditure. I'd like to share with you two examples, and they are both severely disabled people, but they work very hard to find themselves a job, but that has become a curse for them. Their lives are far worse than those collecting benefits. they're facing worse poverty problem. There is this Lady A. She's suffering from cerebral palsy. She is confined to a wheelchair. She is a clerk earning about $10,000 a month, which is not too bad. Because of that, she cannot get any rental housing. She has to live in a private housing. She has to find somewhere which is accessible to a wheelchair, and she has to find somewhere which has to be can be used by a wheelchair. That she spent $9,000 out of $10,000 on rental. She suffers from cerebral palsy, which requires therapy, which costs $2,000–3,000 a month. She's left with about $2,000 for daily life. She's collecting disability allowance, but she has to pay for the transport costs and all the other expenses. And her quality of life has declined considerably. Case number 2, a university graduate. She's suffering from muscle problem, and he has to have care from the family members. He would very much like to be self-reliant because of his muscle spasm. He still looks for a job. His parents are working, and the household income has gone beyond the median household income. Would you consider them as poor? Now they've gone past the median household income. He can't even apply for funding from the CCF to purchase the respirator. Now it's not a question of how to draw the line at 50 or 60%. It's a question of their daily subsistence, that they have to cope with this considerable medical bill, and they would like to contribute themselves to society, however disabled they are. So I hope that Secretary and Honourable Councillors, you have to spare a thought for these severely disabled people. Madam Fong, Kwai Chung, Subdivided Flats Concern Group. Thank you. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. In relation to this poverty line, we've been talking about this for about a decade, and nothing seems to have been done to help the poor. We poor people are struggling very, very hard. Inflation is high, the prices are very high, but there is nothing much we can do. We're living in subdivided flats ourselves, and the rents are going up, the utilities are going up. I've got 2 kids who have paid jobs, and we're collecting CSSA, and I don't think there is any assistance. I mean, even if we're taken ill, we cannot go to the doctor. We just suffer for it. Now you keep talking about this poverty line, but this doesn't go anywhere near to help us. Now the poverty line is pitched at half or 50% of the median household income. It would be a good idea to pitch it at 60%. I mean, I'm speechless. I'm lost for words. But when we go to the market, we only buy the cheap stuff. I'm really lost for words, but I just hope that when you draw the poverty line, it should be in a way that would offer some assistance to us. Thank you. Madam Ho, Kwai Chung Subdivided Flats Alliance. Chairman, I've got in touch with many residents, CSSA recipients. They're living in subdivided flats. These are poor people from the grassroots, and with inflation raging and with high rentals, they simply cannot cope with the expenses incurred for their children's education. This is very much a burden for them. Now, the government is going to pitch the poverty line at 50% of the median household income. I don't think that would mean that they can cope with their own life. I hope that it should be pitched at 60% instead, and that would enable them to cope with life, but only just. There are some families who have the breadwinners who are casual workers, and if they work an hour longer, they may have an income which is higher than the poverty line, and how would you treat them? All right, Tin Shui Wai Parents Group. Ladies and gentlemen, I am representing the Tin Shui Wai Parents Group. I'm Carmen. I have been following the work of the COP. I'd like to make some representation here. First of all, we object to the post-social transfer household income as one of the criteria, like rental housing. The poverty line should be pitched at 6% of the median household income. Take children's welfare, for instance, with the 334 academic structure. The kids have to learn a form of art for life, and there is no subsidy for extracurricular activities. The Education Department has a school-based after-school care program, but they only get $400 in subsidy. The resources are very limited. There is nothing much the school can do to help, and people have to have lot drawn to decide whether to get the subsidy. It is imperative to help with children's development. Without any help, it would be very detrimental to their development. Now, when you set the poverty line, will you cast aside longer and formulate policy to eliminate poverty until we have subsidies for extracurricular activities? How can you help the grassroots with their burning problems? I think that there should be cash subsidies for extracurricular activities. The system has not been reviewed for about a decade, and you have to look after the basic needs of the children. Right, Madam Chen Hua Chen. Chairman, honorable officials and members, I've got a 5-year-old son at K3, and I attend this public hearing to air my views regarding poverty line. Poverty line should be intended to eliminate poverty. Now, with 334 academic structure and liberal studies, you have to learn everything. My kid is 5 years old, and it costs me more than $100 to learn liberal studies, and they have to finish a piece of liberal studies homework online every week. Now, you are studying the 15-year free education. How much longer do you have to spend studying? We have to spend well over $1,000 on the kindergarten school fee, which is very, very difficult for us. We have to save and swim. When my kid was 4, he did ask me, why is it that we haven't drunk any soup for so long? And this is a very, very distressing question for me. Well, this is bad for the growth of the children. This is bad for my kids' development. There is higher and higher expectation on the students with very little subsidies from the government. What can the parents do? Before setting the poverty line, the government should have regard to the development of the children. Honourable officials, how soon are we going to have a 15-year free education? Do we have a timetable? With the poverty line, how can the grassroots be assisted? Would there be any subsidies for extracurricular activities? How soon would this happen? Madam Lam, Alliance for Children Development Right. I am a social worker, Lam Anwar. Our alliance has 3 specific positions. There are many deputations that mentioned this before. First of all, the poverty line should be set at 6% of median household income. We also should have the poverty prevention line at 70% of the household income. According to some surveys, the grassroots people polled indicated that their expenses take up about 70% of the median household income. And it is difficult enough for them to cope. If we pitch it at 50%, then we're lagging behind and we're not really reflecting the true situation. Secondly, the calculation of income, it should not include the rental housing benefits or the old age living allowance. If you take into account the post-social transfer household income as a means to measure the benefits, I don't think you should be divorced from the daily necessities. The COP at the present moment is setting a poverty line which is based on the median household income without any regard to the daily necessities. That is not fair at all. For those who you may have the post-social transfer household income, and you would be able to reduce the size of the poor population, but I think this is wholly ridiculous. If you take into account the market rent vis-a-vis the rental of popular rental housing and consider them to have benefited from it, then that's not good enough. And I hope that you would have regard to the real situation instead of manipulating the figures. Third, we should not be stuck with measuring the effectiveness. We have to have specific objectives in our policies, in our policy formulation. And after the poverty line is said, would there be any intention to reform the social welfare? The children's welfare system is really flawed. Under the 334 academic structure, the students are under tremendous pressure. It is absolutely flawed. We have 350,000 CSSA recipients, and they are collecting textbook allowance, and this poverty line will not be able to help them. Now, what is the whole intention of the poverty line? What policies do you have in mind to assist the poor? All right, a rise of low-income family concern group, Madam Chen. Well, the government said that the poverty line is there to monitor the poverty situation and measure the effectiveness of the policies. But our concern group feels that there should be some targets with regard to poverty line, if someone's income falls below the poverty line, the government has the obligation to do something to help them and to ensure that they would be able to live in a decent manner. And this is the whole purpose of having a poverty line, and I hope that the Secretary would consider this. Now, why doesn't the government take an extra mile to address the gap between the rich and the poor? And also, the poverty line is pitched at 50% of the median household income. I hope that the government should engage the public for more consultation. Today we have a public hearing, and if you feel that the poverty line should be pitched at 60%, then I hope that you would raise, you wave this placard. Thank you. Secretary, please have a look. Everyone here around us is demanding 60% of the median household income. Thank you. Finally, the concerned group feels that we should not merely look at the median household income, we should look at the expenses and their affordability. To what extent can they afford the prices? So when or before you set the poverty line, you should conduct a basic expenditure survey to ascertain the proportion and the pattern of the daily expenditure. Mr. Lee, Alliance Against Making Policies Behind Closed Doors. Chairman, a lot of deputations have stated their views regarding the poverty line. I'd like to explore how the administration views this issue. C.Y. Leung, I won't call him chief executive because he doesn't deserve it. C.Y. Leung did say that setting up the COP and devising the poverty line would fulfill certain objectives. First, he said that the poverty line should measure up to international standard. Second, there is an element of justice, and it has to do with politics. I'd like to approach this from these three angles and find out how the administration views poverty line here.
The government is saying that the poverty line should follow international standard. According to my limited understanding, in different jurisdictions, there are different standards for the poverty line. And secondly, these jurisdictions may not have only a single poverty line. There could be different poverty lines. But for the government, and it is also rumor in the community, that the government will just want to set a single poverty line at 50% of the median household income. I don't know why there should be only a single standard. Why can't we learn from other jurisdictions and have multiple standards? Secondly, question of social justice. The government is saying that the COP has arrived at a major consensus regarding the standard of setting the poverty line, namely 50%. As I said, apparently the consensus within this chamber is that it should be 50%. It should be 60%. The government recognizes its consensus. Thirdly, the poverty line has to do with politics. The government has set up the COP, but the majority of the members of COP come from the business sector, which is telling us that the poor people of Hong Kong, I mean, how many poor people there are in Hong Kong? We inform of this by the rich people, rather than letting the poor people telling us how poor they are. The government is working behind closed doors, and how long will this continue? Coming back to the question of justice, I remember Mrs. Carrie Lam, who is now the CS, previously she was the Director of Social Welfare, and she took the lead to cut the CSSA payment by 11.1%. Today, on the COP, now he is the key figure. So does he still have that commitment for the poor people of Hong Kong? Finally, I'd like to, send this gift to all the government officials and those in the relevant policy bureau, which is a pair of spectacles, a 3D spectacles. Originally, I wanted to simply make the point that one should look at things from a three-dimensional perspective. I hope you would note this. Madam Wu Kwan Ming. Good morning. I'm going to speak in Putonghua because I'm not very fluent in Cantonese. I think it should be said that the income level in Hong Kong, rentals are high. You know how much it costs for a tea of vegetables, more than $30. Transportation costs are expensive, so are medical fees and so on. So what is not expensive? How much are your salaries and how much do we earn? For those in the lower strata, we earn very little. How can we survive? Setting it at 6% is not too unreasonable. It can only meet our basic needs. At a war forum in Wan Chai, someone who lived in a subsidized flat sent something to Mr. Zhang, and today I'm going also give this to Mr. Zhang. I hope you will enjoy this. This is what I'm enjoying every day, and this is, the tragedy of Hong Kong. Every evening I'm being bitten by these bugs, so are my children. I don't know what else to say. Can Mr. Zhang accept this gift from me?
À, 局長可以收啊。OK。幾大鐘啊？我一日又翻工，我屋企嗰個做水嘅。你好驚啊！我哋開會會唔會係唔可以唔好喺度同？We carry on. I don't think you should engage in a direct dialogue with the secretary. Ms. Wu, you still have some time. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I'm sorry. Next, Ms. Ng Yen Yi from the First Step Association. Thank you. I'd like to speak on behalf of the physically disabled and how the poverty line will affect them. Ms. Ho Suk Yi already said that in Hong Kong, we do not have many physically handicapped people, but there are more than 10,000 such people. We have more than 10,000 people who are, disabled, and very often they will live with their families, especially those who are not on CSSA allowance. Why is it that they don't apply for CSSA? Well, I can tell you about one case where this person is paralyzed in the 4 limbs. Originally, he was an engineer. After he was injured, of course, he would he have lost his income, and he was living with his aged parents. Well, the mother was not working, and she couldn't work anyway because she had to look after him. There was a younger brother. The parent, originally retired, had to work again. Under circumstances, they cannot apply for CSSA. So if you're going to set the poverty line at 50% of the median household income, many deputies already raised the figure of 6%. For those whose limbs are paralyzed, they're not reflected as part of the poor. Take this family; they earn, more than $10,000 or $20,000 a month, including the younger brother sister. But then they're not used entirely to pay for the whole household's expenditure. How can the aged parents, exhaust the savings and live in retirement like that? For someone who is severely handicapped in the limbs, not to mention meals and medical care. In Hong Kong, either you apply for CSSA, which the allowance will cover everything. If you don't apply for CSSA, you don't get it. If you see a doctor, you go for rehab services. They all cost money, even though now there is the transport subsidy. But many of these people need to take the rehab bus for medical consultation. Our conservative estimate is that every month, not to mention other luxuries, just payment for the wheelchair, rehab materials, and care by the rehab professional. There's a couple, for example, the wife is a teacher who earns a decent income. She earns more than $20,000 a month, and she had to hire the servant to look after the husband who is paralyzed. So how much do you think is left of her salary?
Dr. Wong Hong also suggests the article that when you calculate the poverty line, there should be a basic subsistence line. So after you've calculated 50%, you must also add on top the necessary the expenses or necessities. Then you can define it in this way. A severely handicapped person, you can have based on medical opinion to prove that he need to incur these expenses every month. We're not saying it should be the poverty line should be set at 50 plus or 60 plus percent, but you cannot simply rely on that single factor to determine whether or not that person is poor. Thank you. This is the first time that we've here to talk about the poverty line, and we don't know whether this will be the last time. We heard that this will be the last consultation. Apparently, there is still a need to continue with the dialogue within the community. The Joint Alliance believe, well, many people are now still arguing whether the poverty line should be set at 40, 50, or 60%. Other than this, we insist that there should be a basic necessities protection. I think we should not just focus on income. Focus on income. I mean, expenses are going up all the time. Even the study on people living in substandard flats undertaken by the government, they called it a survey on these people. The government conducted a study, and they found out that these households have to pay more than $3,000 of rent, while the income is less than $10,000. So they're spending more than 30% on rents. And we're just looking. If you just focus on income, how can you really, appreciate the full extent of the poverty problem? So there should be, therefore, a basic, protection before we can see the real picture of poverty. Secondly, we want the government to, after they've set the poverty line, all the data the government has collected should be disclosed in public and even put on the internet to be accessed by everyone. After you've set the poverty line, is the government going to give us a broad ballpark figure about the total number of poor people in Hong Kong, or is it the case that they will provide all the data they have collected to us? I hope the Secretary can give us an answer. If they can fully disclose all such data, we don't mind you adding things to that. In other countries, when they study the subject of poverty, all the data are put online so that it can help us with our research and help us better understand the problem of poverty. Thirdly, as whether or not public housing rentals should be counted as part of the welfare transfer payment. I don't think we have a thorough discussion yet. The government said that they will take, include the market value of the PRH rentals, but then the market rental for Wen Chai and another PRH essay in a different district will be different. So would that really be workable? Oxfam is saying that rent should take up only 30% of the income, and some. So I think as far as calculating, including whether or not the PRH rental should be counted as part of welfare, I mean, it's still something that is controversial. I think all deputations have spoken. And the focus of the second group is different from those for the first session. First of all, you're concerned about the different definitions of the poverty line. Secondly, should we have two or one poverty lines? And the definition of poverty, the government only consider income, and some definitions said that we should also include expenditures. Other deputations do not agree with the government's point that the poverty line should only be a tool, but it should be actually a tool to help alleviate poverty. Thirdly, the deputations made many policy suggestions. Many of the deputations for the second session are focused on education for the next generation. And finally, the question of transparency. That is, whether or not, Mr. Lai asked whether or not all the data you've collected in the course of your study be disclosed to public. Secretary? Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank all the deputations who have spoken. I really, value your inputs, and certainly the COP and the task force will follow up on on all the points that you've raised, and we'll consider them carefully. Let me first of all respond to some deputations asking why we should set it at 50%. I see you all put up a placards indicating 6%. Well, why is it 50%? Well, the COP had arrived at a preliminary consensus, which is that internationally speaking, the OECD member countries, comprising many senior advanced countries, they are pecking the poverty line at 50% of the median household income. In Hong Kong, for many years, when we talk about the poverty line in the community, basically it's the Council of Social Services and Oxfam, which have been championing the poverty line, and over the years they've adopted the threshold of 50%, and there doesn't seem to have been much objection to that. Whether we have 1.2 or 1.3 million poor people, I think people have been talking about how many poor people there are in Hong Kong. Since within the community, people already accepted the 50% threshold. Furthermore, it's the easiest and most easily understood approach. And in light of Hong Kong's circumstances, the COP therefore came to the conclusion that we should set it at 50%. We are not asking them to depress the figures or to rig the figures. At the beginning, during the first session, I said that it is not our purpose to set the poverty line. We established a COP not for PR purpose. If the government used this as a PR ploy, it wouldn't work. It would certainly be attacked. You can all do the sums. You definitely know whether we'll be able to deliver any results. What is most important is that the administration of this term has indicated that poverty alleviation is one of our core tasks, and we have to deliver results. And we need time to think of the solutions. We have not waited for the poverty line to be set before we've already provided for a two-track system for the transport allowance subsidy scheme, old age living allowance. Although it's controversial, indeed it has helped several hundred thousands of needy elderly persons. And this is a fact. More than 200,000 people have already been paid more than $6,000 on April the 6th. And there will be more improvement measures coming on stream. We're not waiting for the poverty line to be set before we do that. And secondly, you asked about what is the purpose of defining the poverty line. The function of the poverty line is very important. If you have read the paper, you would have found that the poverty line is not just an instrument for us to make measurement. With this gauge, you'll be able to find out who are the groups of people classified as poor households, like ethnic minorities, those who are severely handicapped. So we'll be more focused on looking at the characteristics of these groups. Those, for example, living in the subdivided flats, the crucial problem they face is housing. So if we can help them in the area of housing, and help them to be accommodated PRH, then we can help improve the livelihood. All these are facts. We want to find out what are these groups and what are their characteristics. So we need to look at these carefully. And after we've set the yardstick, and with that as a basis, you can monitor your progress. And through policy intervention, how many people will benefit. Say, for example, people ask for universal retirement scheme. With that scheme being launched, will it really be able to help people? How do you take a measurement? So as I said, you need to have a basis. The basis is that yardstick, commonly accepted yardstick. Only then can we'll be able to find out what is the situation before and after intervention. And I don't want to repeat some of the other details. Just to respond to the organizations who spoke on behalf of the disabled. We understand the plight that they face, but the yardstick cannot be tailor-made for a single small group. Rather, we want to be more focused. There's a task force under the COP, especially responsible for looking into the needs of ethnic minorities and the disabled. We will particularly focus on the severely handicapped, those who need breathing machines. We are already helping these people through the Community Care Fund.
On April 1st, the SWD will be launching a subsidy for the care of the severely disabled senior persons. More than 3,000 will benefit. So we do it step by step to further help those in need. I also like to respond to two more points. One deputation mentioned about only giving $100 million to the food bank. For the food bank, I believe before the adjournment of this council this year, I will go back to the FC to apply for another $100 million, and we will comprehensively review these food banks to see how we can help more people. Someone said that it's only 6 weeks. Could we extend it further? I'm certainly willing to follow up on that. Perhaps, Chairman, I'll pause here. I'd like to ask how many members would like to ask questions. If there are not many members who want to ask questions, I can also allow some of the deputations a second round. We have Fernando Zhang, Mr. Zheng Guokqu, Mr. Leung Kwok. Okay, shall we say 3 minutes each? Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the deputations for coming this morning. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to thank the deputations who came for the first session. The poverty problem in Hong Kong is already very serious. It's a long-standing problem. The Secretary has been working in the Labour and Health and Welfare Bureau for many years. Over the years, the problem has not improved. It's deteriorating. So I think you are actually, in dereliction of your duties. Same for the whole administration. We had this problem for so many years. You've set up a COP, and then Donald Trump abolished the COP, and CY Leung revived it, and now talking about the setting of poverty line as if it was a major charity, and then you are saying that the poverty line should be set at half the median monthly household income. Chairman, 50%. Of course, the international precedent. Many community groups have used this as draw the line at 50%. But when the government official has to set this poverty line, it has to look carefully at how this line is going to be applied in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we have many single person whose medium income is quite low. Many of them are old people. So our medium income for a single person is $3,650. That's the figure for the fourth quarter of last year. According to the government's report, on average, the CSSA payment for a single person is more than $4,000, which is the CSSA allowance is even higher than that of the poverty line by more than $800. We're talking about a difference of 20%. So, Secretary, don't you find this ridiculous? You've come up with this poverty line and it's set at even lower than the CSSA allowance by 20%. So what do you mean? So those who are on CSSA allowance definitely will be better off than these poor families, single households, by 20%. And what is even more regrettable is that the entire COP is working behind closed doors as if they were discussing state secrets. We're talking about the setting of a poverty line and the different levels at which we set it. I think you can apply statistical analysis, and I think you should also involve the public in your discussion. But you're hiding all the documents. You're on the COP yourself, Chairman. You have, and you're not allowed to disclose the information because of the confidentiality requirement. And then at the meeting, you show us PowerPoints and no papers are given, the agenda and the minutes are not disclosed. What state secret is the COP discussing? Secretary.
There are a few points I want to clarify. The work of the COP is not behind closed doors. As I explained last time, a lot of our discussions are internal, about internal resources allocation, and they're still in progress. We think these should be discussed behind closed doors. But certain information have already been uploaded to the internet, so it's not completely closed. And our door is always open, and we take a lot of opinion. We listen to a lot of requests, criticisms. I completely support this idea. The government is committed to tackle this problem rather than to run away from it, and that's why we're all here today. Just now, you mentioned the CSSA assistance level being lower than poverty line. And this is what I meant by that the poverty line is not same as the welfare line. Do you mean we do not want to help the poor people? And the answer is no. In a lot of countries, and not just Hong Kong, when setting the poverty line, you cannot possibly know the assets of the people. Some people have a lot of assets. They are assets rich and income poor. This is a very a tricky problem to handle. And they might be poor, but they have a lot of assets. So each of our welfare programs, we have indicators in place. For example, the transport subsidy. On a personal level, it's a 100% subsidy. It's not just 50 or 60% subsidy. The $7,000 transportation subsidy is 100%. For books allowance, it's set at 70%. So you have to understand that for each of our welfare initiatives, we do not link poverty line with welfare line, because the subsidies depend on the qualifications of the applicants. So the government is not actually ignoring the problem. We are tackling the root of the problems. The poverty line cannot possibly be even lower than the CSSA level because of time limitations. Next time we'll have another meeting on this. I hope we can leave some time for the groups to ask questions. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, the Secretary mentioned the 50% mark for the monthly median household income, and he said that he's following OECD and taking reference from HKCSS and Oxfam. But what I want to say to the Secretary is that for the European Union, it's 50%. The OECD, HKCSS and Oxfam are just they just came up with their own figures. You cannot just borrow the figures from them and say that this is the commonly accepted norm. And we have not had any discussions before regarding their percentage, whether it's 50 or 60%. I think the government should give us ample arguments so that we can discuss openly in the public. And you did not explain Mr. Cheng's question. You did not explain how the CSSA levels for one person and 6-person families being even lower than the poverty line. And just now, some groups mentioned that. Can you do you have to count disposable income as part of the calculation? We have not had any in-depth discussions on this, and we do not have enough time for this today. Thirdly, the government should listen to a lot of groups today who mentioned the basic living expenses. We should have a baseline to cover these basic living expenses. I think we cannot cover these today, but I hope the government will be able to start these discussions before the 8th of May. First of all, for how is the percentage set, and how do we set the baseline, and how do we determine the amounts of disposable income? I think I know it's difficult to set the amount of disposable income to use because we do not have enough figures. I think the government can carry out surveys with the Census Department every year. We can wait for the figures, but if we do not tackle this problem, no matter you set the mark at 50 or 60%, it's still in vain. We will try our best to give more information before the next meeting. We want you to understand that in the past, HKCSS and Oxfam are widely accepted, and their figures were also widely understood and accepted by the society. And they have been at the forefront in this regard. Before the next meeting, I will invite our Chief Economic Officer, Ms. Ng, to talk about the economic findings. In terms regards to the disposable income, we hope to update the poverty line each year so that it serves its purpose of monitoring. For disposable income, it's part of the expenditure. Every 5 years, the government has a detailed survey every 5 years, and the next one will be carried out in 2014. In the Financial Committee, when we discussed the poverty line, we all understood that the main poverty line. We hope that the main poverty line is our priority. And in the future, if we have enough data, we won't rule out the possibility of studying its impacts. But we do need data supports. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. I had a protest earlier in Legislative, and I was arrested by the security guards. I was interrogated, and I looked at Mr. Tong Shihua. And now we have this poverty line. At that time, if we had a poverty line or a good poverty line, no matter what the government does, they have to safeguard the welfare of the people. The government did not make any promises to the society and does not have a view on the problem of poverty. So the government can change things around all the time, juggle things around all the time. We need to have a clear concept in order to understand the situation. But the government does not have any idea what is a good situation and what is a bad situation. If you have an existing policy in place, but if you say that if this measure cannot solve the problems, it's a failure, and you have to look at other ways actively. No matter CSSA or social welfare, you have to step up your efforts. Now you are messing around. If you are talking about disposable income, you have to set a line. Apart from essential expenditure, if a person has a lower income than the a fixed standard, then he can be considered poor. And anyone who loses social security because of family situations, if someone in the family cannot receive social welfare because of his or her situation in the family, it's not fair. So let's not argue. If you are talking to us academically, you are not qualified. If you are talking about European Commission, the OECD would not tackle this problem. Do you think the European Commission it is suffering from bad reputations recently in terms of finance? Do you know how much reserve we have? So which country in EU has $1,500 billion in reserves? I don't need an answer from him. Next year we can talk about it in the next meeting. I will meet him again at another event today. So do you agree that we extend the meeting by 15 minutes? Thank you, Chairman. Today I'm very happy that all the groups have voiced their opinions, and I've been here since 9:30, and I have listened to all the opinion. In the first round, one of the representatives said something which is very to the point. Hong Kong is using running a residual policy, and some people, they would not help people who are only having a meal a day, but they only help people who have no meals every day. A lot of groups who are present today, they are not recipients of the CSSA network. A lot of people might have meals today, but they are having inadequate meals today. Maybe they are living in subdivided flats, or other groups. So what this is saying that, Secretary, we have a problem with our existing mode for people who are in the middle or near the bottom. These are the people who need to earn a living. They might be able to have a meal a day, but this is not enough. I hope the government does not just help people who are not able to have any meals a day. There are other people who need help. And we also gave the Secretary a pair of glasses because the government has no focus in its work in the past. Coming up, I hope the COP can be more focused in the future, in their future work. Just now, Mr. Kwok did not raise the 60% sign just now. Just now, it's not enough to just set one singular poverty line. We should look at the entire overall social policy. Whether the percentage is 50 or 60 or 70, we have to show the governments whether their policies are effective, whether the policies might be too rigid. I think we should have different lines to gauge the situation. I think the government should pay attention to that. Apart from a poverty line to provide support to the poor, the government must have a clear vision they should look at labor rights and economic rights. A lot of low-income individuals, they they are underemployed because the government did not have enough support to their industries apart from the finance and logistics industries. Did they do enough to help the to facilitate employment among low-income individuals? Can they help low-income individuals to find a stable job and have a stable income? Chairman, please give a simple answer. Just now you are talking about the big picture, and this is something the COP wants to tackle. And we are not just looking at the poverty line. We look at minimum wage, and we are looking at how to support low-income individuals, supporting young people, employment, including we are also supporting women and people with disabilities, youth groups. I just want to take this chance to respond to the question that's why do we not follow the EU 60% mark? Actually, the 60% mark in the EU is the risk line. 60% is the poverty at risk mark. You have to understand that the international standard is it's between 50 to 60%. 60% is the risk line. So from our experience, on the meeting on the 8th of May, I will explain this in detail. Mr. Kwok's question, we are looking at the whole package. We cannot look at a single item. Apart from welfare, we look at how to equip the grassroots workers, the different underprivileged people. This is what the current administration is focusing on. I hope to have another round of questions, but I have to reserve 5 minutes for the Secretary to respond. Any more questions? 3. We have 7 questions, so 1 minute for each person, and then the Secretary will respond. So we have 8.
Your hands up, please. Yes, please. Mr. Lee Tai-sing, if I may put this to the Secretary, you said that you're implementing a lot of poverty alleviation measures, and you're not waiting for the poverty line, but why still we have the controversy? Will you consider having more careful discussion? Well, you're going to have the survey on the disposable income. Will you wait for that before you put in place the poverty line? The poverty line would cover so many people. There are NGOs that ask us, with the level pitched at 50% of the median household income, what's going to happen to all these welfare benefits? I don't think you should be rushing headlong into it. You have to mull over this in greater detail. Mr. Ng, Chairman, the Secretary talked about the rental housing, and he's saying that the rental housing is helping the grassroots a lot. That much I agree. There is a considerable assistance, but I heard that you would adopt the rating evaluation department's evaluation. Let's say the rental is $1,500 and the market rent is $6,000, and you take the differential. Does it reflect the assistance derived from rental housing? In Kwai Chung district, we have a lot of subdivided flat tenants, and they're fetching $3,000-4,000. But if they get housed in rental housing, they're paying less in rent. Now, without rent housing, they would not be prepared to rent proper housing for $6,000, and they would still rent subdivided flats for $3,000. Chairman, the Secretary basically is in agreement that if we adopt this poverty line pitched at median household income, there are still people who will be left behind. Like the disabled people, whatever percentage you adopt, they will be left behind. So why doesn't the Secretary consider doing a survey on the subsistence need? You should look at different categories of people and then work out how much assistance these different people require in terms of assistance. Madam Link. Now, this level of 50% at HKCSS and Oxfam decided on this. Now, they have been talking about this for a decade. Previously, it cost to a few dollars, of $5, $6 to buy a catty of vegetables. Now it is more than a few dozen dollars. As inflation changes, as situation changes, you should keep up with the changes instead of just looking at the HKCSS percentage. Why don't you heed the voices of the general public? How do you arrive at this level? Is it the consensus of the COP, or is it the consensus of the whole population? Yes, please. Chairman, the Secretary said a moment ago that the poverty line alone cannot give rise to any poverty alleviation measures. So I hope that you would listen to what the public has to say. You should conduct an expenditure survey, and then you come up with the different lines. We are concerned that for you to put together this poverty line, the social welfare department might follow, but for other measures, you may not be able to link it with the poverty line, and those in rental housing cannot get anything in terms of help. Now, if you don't know how to make soup, the Tin Shui Wai residents can make you some soup to nourish your spine, and I hope that you would do something to help the poor. Madam Lam, I ran out of time just now. I've come with a picture. Now, this is the picture drawn by a K3 student in Tin Shui Wai. There is a house there and a number of different fruits with a dollar sign attached to them. For a young kid like this, she understands the problems. How much you understand their problems, Mr. Secretary? Now, you told us what you have done, but I can't see how this is being helpful. The Children Development Fund, 4,000 people have been assisted in 4 years. The District Youth Program, 27,000 people have been helped in 5 years. But the children population, we have 350,000. Do you think you are able to help them? Let me repeat the question that you haven't quite answered. The government should not really do any window dressing. You have to do the practical work. Now, does the government have any concrete plans? Secretary, I'm not sure whether you're coming from a different planet. You talked about the food bank, $100 million. Now, as far as I understand, the food bank is there to help the needy for the short term instead of on a long-term basis. My understanding is that a lot of grassroots people have to rely on the food bank for assistance. So other than welfare, you're also in charge of labor. Don't you think you should improve the statutory minimum wage? Don't you think you should improve or revamp the tax system? You refer to the Oxfam. The chairman of Oxfam, Mr. Stephen Fisher, criticized the government for dressing up the account. Now, I think this is wholly embarrassing for the administration if a former official made such remarks. I suppose everybody's in agreement. First, for the rental housing expenses, I'm wondering whether you would transfer the rental in the public housing in this equation. Second, after this whole study on poverty, will you make public all the data for public consumption for our analysis? All right, have I missed out on anybody? Madam Wu? If I may put this to the Secretary. Now, he said 300,000 people are in the middle class. How much do you make per month? And what class are we in? We're zero asset class. Please mind your language, Madam Wu. We are suffering. We're making about $10,000. What you're making in a month, we have to struggle for 3 years to make the same amount. We can't afford to buy a glass of water. I think you have to think about this. All right, Secretary. Let me consolidate my reply. I defer to Madam Wu to tell members about the rental housing. We haven't quite reached any conclusion yet. I'd like to say that there are three functions of the poverty line. First, to gauge the poverty situation, to facilitate policy formulation, and to review policy effectiveness. This is not tied to any funding allocation. As I said earlier on, each welfare policy is predicated on its own principles, like work incentives, transport subsidy scheme. If you apply this poverty line, then a lot of people would be excluded in the first place. Even if this is 100%, we still make this available. It's not restricted to 50%. So please do not come away with the misconception that if it is preached that 50%, people will be denied the benefits. Now, the OALA is also very liberal. It's not the CSSA standard is 4-5 times the CSSA level in terms of criteria. Madam talked about this survey, which will get underway in 2014. Do we have to sit around and wait until 2014 before we start looking at the poverty line? Then people will be criticizing the government for stalling the matter. So right now, shouldn't we be more pragmatic and take on board the experience internationally? And we have HKCSS and Oxfam that have been doing this for some time. I think it's a good idea for us to adopt something which is easily comprehensible and get started with the work first. Madam please. Chairman, thank you. Well, a lot of the deputations come from Tin Shui Wai. Let me cite Tin Shui Wai as an example to illustrate how we work out the social transfer formula. Let's take a Tin Hang Chun, a 3P household. Now we take the rental minus the rates, government rent and management fee. The net rent is about $800 for the unit. The rating evaluation will look at this particular rental unit, that they would not adopt the private housing unit rental for evaluation. They would assume they would evaluate the rental if this unit is put out for public rental. Now, according to rating evaluation, this unit would fetch $2,000 in the private market. Now, for the private market, the market rental, let me just finish, please. For this 3P rental unit, it fetches $2,000 in the private market. Now, unit transfer equation, we would take $1,200. Now, you may argue that private housing in Tin Shui Wai fetches a different price. If you look at the neighboring Tin Sing Court, which is in Tin Shui Wai, similar size unit in the private sector, it is fetching $6,100. We're not taking $6,100 and subtract $800. Now, we are merely working it out to be $1,200. This is not the first time we adopt this means. The Census and Statistics Department, when conducting the bi-census in 2006, did look at the income distribution. That they conducted extensive consultation. They consulted academics in different spheres before coming up with the figure, and the academics were also in agreement. So this is by way of an example to illustrate that we're not adopting the rental in the private sector for extrapolation. 22nd Secretary, well, I've got nothing to add except to say that I'm grateful to all your opinions. Secretary, please. Any supplement? No, thank you, Chairman. All right, that's where we end the public hearing. I'd just like to let you know that we're going to have another meeting on May the 8th. The Secretariat would summarize the views expressed by members as well as the deputations. And all these views will be consolidated into a paper for discussion. And then the members will decide whether there is anything they'd like to add, and that will represent the views of the subcommittee. And we will have further opportunity to have a go at this issue on May the 8th. My thanks to all the deputation and secretary.